Hi, I'm Mary Beth Ray, and today we're going to talk about headstand. There are different kinds of headstands, so today we're going to specifically talk about Salamba Shirshasana, which is supported headstand, a particular type of headstand. It's considered the king of all poses, headstand is, and why is that? Well, it requires a certain amount of range of motion in your body. It requires a certain amount of strength. Requires a certain amount of body awareness, where you are in space, to understand how to take information through your arms, which is a sense of proprioception. So it requires that you have a sense of proprioception through your arms and your hands and your fingers and wrists and that sort of thing. It's really the ultimate peak pose, because you think about all these things that you do in your practice to get that strength, to get that body awareness, to get that range of motion in the shoulders and the hips and everything. So you're using the whole rest of your practice to get ready to do a headstand, right? And it's really the pose of patience. So it's going to take some time for all this to come into play. It's an intermediate to advanced pose, so don't perform this pose if you don't have sufficient strength or range of motion or proprioception. But you can do a bunch of things to prepare for it. So there's something called headstand prep, is what I call. So we'll do that today as well. So we'll go through the preparatory phases of a headstand. We'll work on what it entails to get into a headstand, and you can work on gaining more confidence and putting all those pieces together. So you can bring that all into your practice. So not only your practice feeds into headstand, but doing a headstand feeds into the rest of your practice as well. But there are a few contraindications, so I just want to point these out, that if you have glaucoma or macular degeneration, or if you have high blood pressure, or maybe a heart condition, or neck or back injury, it's probably not advisable to try headstand at this point. Or if you're currently even feeling like you have a headache, it's probably not good, because there's so much pressure that comes into reversing your relationship to gravity that those kinds of issues are going to be exacerbated. So probably not the best pose for you if you have any of those things. And I do want to point out two things for women, because there's these two myths that get floated around about headstand for women. One is that you absolutely should not do this if you are pregnant. Now, if you are brand new to that, you've never done headstand before and you're pregnant, correct. Just like anyone who has not done headstand before, if you haven't created all this strength or range of motion or proprioception in your body, being pregnant is not the time to do it. So if it's new to you, correct, you probably should not do headstand. If you're an experienced headstand practitioner and you're pregnant, you could probably continue to do headstand. You just figure out how it feels in your body. I know people who have done headstand way late into their third trimester, and totally fine. They have the right amount of connection to their body that they can practice this safely. Anecdotally, though, if it's late in the trimester, if you hold it for a very long time, there have been stories of the baby turning around and going breech. So don't hold it for a long time. Just pay attention to what's going on in your body. But the myth that you absolutely should not do it when you're pregnant, it's really a myth. You really should pay attention to what's going on in your body. The other myth is that you should not do headstand if you're menstruating. And this is also, the reason they say that is they feel like the blood will reverse course. It's changing the energetic levels of your body. The fact that the blood reverses courses is actually not true at all. And the reason we know this is that there are female astronauts where there's no gravity, and they still experience blood flow. So the reality is it does not reverse the blood flow. We're not staying in headstand for as long as the ancient yogis used to do it anyway. But also, so that's just really not a hard and fast rule that you shouldn't do a headstand when you're menstruating. But again, it's really up to you. It really depends on your energy levels and how does it make you feel. So the first 3 days of a menstruation, usually the hardest, and your energy wanes, so it might not be the best time to do a headstand or any kind of intense practice during the first 3 days of your period. In fact, in the Ashtanga tradition, they call those first 3 days a ladies' holiday. So you take your ladies' holiday and then come back to your practice when you have a more consistent level of energy. Okay, so again, no hard and fast rules there. It's really judged for yourself. But I do have one hard and fast rule with headstand before we get going. Do not practice at the wall. The wall gives you a false sense of understanding of that inversion, And we want to work on getting the strength and the proprioception and the range of motion in our shoulder girdle. And when you're flinging yourself against the wall, you are kind of losing that sense of understanding from your body. So it can happen, and in a large class, maybe the teacher wants everybody to be at a wall, but anyway, I just say don't practice at a wall, and I will teach you today on how to do it without the wall, okay? So let's get started. All right, so we're going to start on our knees, and let's just assume that we've already warmed up, that we've already gone through a practice, and we will go through sort of the mechanics of it right now. And so we're going to start with our forearms down on the floor, and the elbows are shoulder width distance apart. Now what that looks like is the elbows are not out to the side a bit. They're not very drawn in. They're right underneath the shoulders. I think that's about right. So you can think about it so that you are using the structure of your bones and your shoulder girdle as your foundation. So the elbows can be right underneath the shoulders. The palms for now, we're going to have them flat on the floor. And we're going to just tuck the toes and take a little weight in the forearms coming into dolphin pose. I'm just hanging with the head. So dolphin pose is a really nice prep pose for headstand. You're starting to get information into the shoulder girdle. And you can see if you are dropping into your shoulders or if you can come up out of the shoulders, dropping or coming up out. There's building awareness in the shoulder girdle and strength. So that is one preparatory pose. You can take that for a few breaths when people are doing headstand and you're still working on it. You are taking yourself into dolphin pose. You can interlace the fingers. This is the next phase, interlacing the fingers. And once you do that, there's one pinky down here at the bottom. And usually what I do is I place that one pinky inside the other one so that they form more of a flat surface on the bottom, and that one pinky doesn't get crunched when you start to take weight into the hands. So the elbows are below your shoulders, interlace the fingers, and this wrist line is long. So once you get up there, you might start to bend the wrist and come out, but if you're starting with it bent, you have no structure there. So start with the structure of the wrist long with the back of the hand and the wrist in the same plane. And then once you start to take weight, they might roll out, but that's you're starting in a place of structure. So elbows under shoulders, forearms, sides of your wrists, hands are on the floor. You tuck your toes, you lift your head, or lift your hips rather, and let your head dangle. The head does not need to go into the hips or into the heels of the hands yet. And then you're just sussing out, what does it feel like to take weight into the forearms, into the wrist, into the hands? And you're taking the weight into the elbows, up into the shoulders, and the head again is dangling. You can walk your toes a little bit closer to your elbows, and this is starting to feel like you're taking a little bit more weight into the shoulder girdle. And again, you can suss out, what does that feel like? Can I bear this weight? Am I strong enough? This is where you're building strength. So dolphin pose is like the first phase of getting used to doing a headstand. You can do that for as long as it takes to start to feel stronger, right? You're getting strong in other poses too, so you can choose this as just one more version. And it's an inversion, right? So your hips are over your heart, you're doing the inversion, you're taking weight in your arms, you're doing your headstand essentially. You just haven't brought your feet up into it, no big deal. Okay, so tucking your toes, coming up into dolphin pose. You can walk your toes closer to your shoulder, or elbows rather, and then let your head nestle down into the heels of the hands. So the back of the skull is in the heels of the hands. You're walking the toes a little bit closer, and then just start taking one leg off the floor at once. So your tailbone might be more towards the foot of the mat, towards that far. So you might just be rounding up and coming up on the very tippy toe of that foot on the floor, and then switching sides, one knee at a time. Coming up and coming down, going back and forth. And this might be where you're practicing. just starting to take a little bit more weight into the arms. So even though the head is nestled down into the heels of the hands, there is very little weight. At the beginning, you might feel a bit of weight, but you're trying to push through the arms and coming through the arms, and the head is just there for balance and not for weight bearing. Okay, so you're coming here. The whole point of, or the whole reason you come up is physics, right? So your tailbone goes past center as your legs are straight. Your tailbone's going past center because then your body is leaning this way with the weight of your legs on this side. And so then you're starting to bring the legs up and coming up into headstand. So you have to have enough flexion in the hips to bring the tailbone past center and then feel confident and strong enough in the forearms and the shoulders and the back that you can hold yourself up while the legs transition to that vertical position. And there's two different ways of transitioning your legs. One could be with bent knees first, and the other one is straight legs. So we'll do it both ways. So forearms down, interlace your fingers, protect that little pinky. Coming up into dolphin, walking the toes toward the heels, letting the head nestle into the heels of the hands. And then you're going to come up, one knee bends, sinking. See how the tailbone goes past center? This toe gets very light. And then maybe bring the other one out. So you're just hanging out here. You could just spend several practices practicing balancing right here and coming down gently. So the more control you have going up, try to translate that control coming down, not collapsing out of it, because you're starting to gain proprioception of your body in space through your arms, through your wrists, and you want to listen to that proprioception as much as we would listen to our wiggly feet when we're on one foot and balancing. Our nervous system is listening to all those wiggles. We're starting to listen to all of the little wiggles in all of the bones throughout this whole structure, right? So I'll show you that again. Walking the toes forward. At one point, your hips are past center and your toes just come off the floor, right? So there's just this tipping point where you are balanced. Your tailbone's past center. You're just reaching through the feet, and maybe the legs come straight up. Reaching through the toes, activating the feet. Even though they're not weight-bearing, they're lifting yourself up, pressing into the arms, light on the head. And then slowly reversing course. The tailbone has to come back. Gently down to the floor and pausing there. So 2 different ways to come up. One knee at a time, one knee bends at a time, or both legs come up. Either way, your tailbone has to go past center, and you have to hold your structure soundly, right? So there is, I think that's about it. Let's do it a couple more times. We'll try it both ways. One way with your knees bent, and one way with your legs straight. Okay, with the legs straight now. So I have a bolster here to show you one example that might help you if you're still trying to get enough flexion in the hips to get that tailbone past center. And this might be a way to support yourself to get to that point where you can find that balance point. So your bolster is here. Come over it. Place your arms down. Tuck your toes. Place your head down and place your feet on the bolster. Now you're a little bit higher. You can walk your toes forward towards your heels and then reverse coming into it. It might be easier to find that point where your tailbone goes past center if your feet are up a little bit higher. One option. It's just, like I said, the one hard and fast rule for me as a teacher of headstand, and I love to teach headstand, is not to do it at the wall, because you're flinging yourself up, and especially when you're in the room without any wall, you don't jump, you don't push, you don't propel yourself there. As long as everything is starting to take their role in this whole foundation of your shoulders, your forearms, your spine, your hips, eventually there'll be a point where it's a balance point. Then you start to work on holding that balance. Then you start to work with unfolding it up into the air. But piece by piece. That's why I call it the pose of patience. So I think that's all I wanted to share with you today. Enjoy your headstand. Enjoy your preparation for your headstand. Just take some time, be patient. Thank you.